Welcome to episode 29 of the LorainCounty.com Business Insights Podcast. I'm your host, Ed Skimmon, and today we're talking with Brenda Buchanan, candidate for the Ohio House of Representatives for the 54th District. Join us as Brenda shares her motivations for running, her experience on the local school board, and her main priorities, including preserving public education, supporting trade schools, and advocating for workers' rights. She also discusses the role of technology, the growth of Lorain County, and her commitment to community involvement. This episode is part of the 2024 Candidate Spotlight Series, aimed at providing an additional way to learn about local leaders running for office. Before we get started, I wanted to share a quick disclaimer. Both of the companies I co-founded, Emerge Inc. and LorainCounty.com, have professional relationships with some of the candidates, and I also count a few of them as personal friends. To ensure fairness, we invited all local candidates to participate and record an episode completely free of charge. Each candidate running for the same office was asked the exact same questions, and aside from removing any unnecessary sounds and long pauses, we kept the editing to a minimum. For a full list of local candidates and issues, visit loraincounty.com/election. And on election night, visit loraincounty.com for real-time election results. Here's my conversation with Brenda Buchanan.
Brenda Buchanan, and I'm running for State House Representative for District 54.
Welcome, Brenda. Thanks for joining us and sharing your insights. To start with, what motivated you to run for the Ohio House of Representatives?
I just thought that we could use a little common sense in our legislature, and I served for 8 years on my local school board. 4 of those years I was president. I was also concurrently on the JVS board, and I started on the school board in 2008, so I know how to work with taxpayers' money when times are tough. I know about Ohio Revised Code, and I know how to work with different groups of people who don't necessarily share the same ideas, who kind of maybe are butting heads. But I think in the board, I learned a lot about how to bring people together. People from very opposing, like during levy time, it was always a very tough time because the community was like, no, I don't want to pay for it. But I learned how to do that pretty well. And that's what I'd like to do in Columbus.
Can you outline your main priorities if you're elected to the Ohio House?
One of my main priorities is working to preserve our public schools. Last year, the state put almost $1 billion into private schools through vouchers. And not only is that not right, it's sending your tax money where there's no accountability for it. Because public schools are accountable for every single penny they spend, but private schools are not, especially when it's tax dollars. I think that's very important, supporting our trade schools as well as our colleges. And I'm very pro-union, so I always want to help workers, dignity in work, making sure people don't have to work 2 to 3 jobs. Not that I can do it by myself, but I want to work toward that.
How would your election and the implementation of your priorities benefit local businesses?
Local businesses, one, by supporting public education, and especially the support of trade schools, we would be giving people the skills to run small businesses. The beauty of the trade schools in Ohio is they're not just a trade. They are also, many of them are partnered with local community colleges. So not only do you get the hands-on training, you get some of that administrative training too. So I think by supporting public education, that would help in that area. And then working on other areas with dignity in work, you would work on affordable housing for your workers, dependable childcare, transportation, the kind of things that can support workers who come into work in small businesses.
What role do you see technology and innovative practices playing in the future of the Ohio House of Representatives?
We could be better at communications with our constituents. Right now, the Ohio legislation webpage is fantastic. But moving forward with the technology and stuff like that coming through, it also changes the nature of a lot of our small businesses and our regular businesses, because during the pandemic, you saw a lot of people start Etsy accounts where they would sell from online, from their homes. And now that's turned into pop-up shops, which some people that has subsequently turned into actual land property owning for their businesses. And I think that the state could also put money into, especially in your rural areas, better broadband, because we don't have that. And my district is very rural. And then you have to work on promoting the use of the technology.
What trends do you see in Lorain County and in Ohio, and how would you like to see government adapt to these changes?
I see huge growth in a lot of parts of Lorain County. Even in my township, we've grown exponentially in the 30 years I've lived there. We need to adapt to that, but we also need to take into consideration that there are areas that are not growing, that want to stay small, that want to have smaller businesses, etc.
If elected, how will you define success? What metrics will you use to measure your progress towards that success?
hopefully by bills that get passed that promote, again, public education, dignity in work, opportunity for everybody, helping small businesses. One of the things like in my district is that the small businesses have like the little town centers. Columbia doesn't, unfortunately, where I live, but like Wellington and Oberlin and Norwalk, they all have a little downtown, and it becomes that weekend destination thing, which I think due to the internet and the technology, it's become a big deal. So I would like to see that promoted, more help with the state to promote that and to support that. Help with small business owners and providing health care for their employees. I don't know exactly how that would work, right? But that is something I would want to help with.
Let's switch over and talk a little bit about you. What's your background? You mentioned the school board, but what else?
So I grew up in a working class family in Berea, Ohio, which is right next to Columbia. I went to Kent State for radio and television, and I have been in the radio business for almost 40 years now. I am a radio traffic manager, which doesn't mean I go up in the helicopter. It means I schedule all the commercials. I started out at a small station in Akron. I worked for Cleveland Radio for years, and then our company regionalized, and they sent us home during the pandemic, my department. So now I'm actually the regional traffic supervisor of the New England region, which includes Boston, Springfield, Providence, Richmond, and Norfolk, and the flagship station for the Boston Red Sox. So that's what I do for a living, other than, being on the school board. And I've been active in my community the last 2 years. Actually, I've been active in the Lorain County Democrats, and I've been doing their social media for them.
In your professional career, what are you most proud of accomplishing?
Being in it for so long. I say it's like the Wizard of Oz. In radio, people come and go so quickly here. But in my department, that usually doesn't happen because literally we handle the time and money. That's what we do. We maximize revenue. But I think probably the proudest thing is being adaptable. I started out at a little radio station in Kent, Ohio, that back in 1986 did logs by hand. They didn't even have computers yet. Yeah, it was crazy. And I think the fact that I've managed the implementation of 7 or 8 software systems, I'm able to continually adapt to the situation. And again, like on the school board, work with departments that are at odds with each other because like your salespeople want to make their money and your programming people want to have a product and art. And sometimes those things don't go together. I'm like that little person in the middle who says, okay, look, this is what we're going to do to make this happen.
Outside of work, what are your hobbies and interests and how do they help recharge you?
My biggest hobby is reading. I love to read. Before I had kids, I read 5 to 7 books a week. Now that I'm campaigning, it's about 1. I love not just fiction. I read a lot of nonfiction. I love history. I love traveling to museums, going to historic places. My husband and I like to go to antique shows and flea markets. We always want to do projects with the things we buy. Like at the antique store, I bought this old window and I bought glass plates to glue on there. So crafty stuff. But yeah, really the reading and the history thing is like my therapy.
Last question. What else should voters know about you prior to voting in November?
That I'm a very good multitasker. I'm very good at solving problems. It's what I do professionally every day. And it's what I did when I was on the school board. I'm very committed to public service, making a difference for other people. I ended up on the school board because I saw something there that I thought I could fix, which was the communications between the community and the school board. At the time, they were not good. So I went and did that. And then I realized how fulfilling it was to be a public servant, to be a problem solver. I loved when we would have citizens come into our meetings. And I know this is going to be hard to translate to the State House, but I'm supposing you could do it at a committee level, is where you'd bring in a group of people and you'd all sit down and say, okay, let's share solutions. And then you'd come up with an answer to the problem. And everybody was a part of it. And I think that's what deep down, I want everybody to be involved. I want everybody to be involved in our government. And I feel like it's a job I can do well. And what you see is what you get. I'm not a different person away from the campaign trail. I'm very honest. My mom raised me with an incredible work ethic, and I'm ready to do the job.
Finally, where can people get more information on your candidacy and connect with you?
I have a website. It's BrendaBuchanan4Ohio.com. I'm also on Facebook under Buchanan for Ohio. I'm on Instagram. My website's probably the best place to get information.
Thanks, Brenda, for joining us and sharing your insights.
You're welcome. Thank you very much for the opportunity to talk to you today.
Thank you for tuning in to this episode of the LorainCounty.com Business Insights Podcast. We hope you found this conversation informative and that it provided some ideas that will help your business continue to grow. Please follow us on your favorite podcast platform to hear each episode where we shine a spotlight on local resources that will boost your business. And we want to hear from you. Email ed@loraincounty.com to share your feedback and topic ideas.